Last time, we have finished reading the second sutta of this chapter, the Buddha's conception and birth. Today, we are going to continue with the third sutta, the quest for enlightenment. The third section in this chapter, the first sutta, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace. Monks, there are these two kinds of search, the noble search and the ignoble search. And what is the ignoble search? Here, someone being himself subject to birth seeks what is also subject to birth. Being himself subject to aging, he seeks what is also subject to aging. Being himself subject to sickness, he seeks what is also subject to sickness. Being himself subject to death, he seeks what is also subject to death. Being himself subject to sorrow, he seeks what is also subject to sorrow. Being himself subject to defilement, he seeks what is also subject to defilement. Okay. So this sutta started with two kinds of search the Buddha explains. What are the two? The noble search and the ignoble search. What is the ignoble search? We seek whatever is subject to birth, aging, death, sickness, sorrow, defilement. This is what is called ignoble search. The next paragraph, the Buddha will expand what the Buddha means. Sister Aikim, would you like to read?
6:11. And what may be said to be subject to birth, aging, sickness and death, to sorrow and defilement, wife and children, men and women, slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver. These acquisitions are subject to birth, aging, sickness and death, to sorrow and defilement, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly absorbed in them, being himself subject to birth, to sorrow and defilement, seeks what it is also subject to birth, to sorrow and defilement.
Thanks, Sister Aikim. Let's take a look at footnotes number 10. In the unabridged version of this text, gold and silver are excluded from the things subject to sickness, death, and sorrow, but they are subject to defilement, according to PS, because they can be alloyed with metals of lesser worth. Okay, let's take a look. What does alloyed mean? Okay, seems like the commentary says alloy here means an inferior metal mixed with a precious one, a metal made by combining two or more metallic elements, especially to give greater strength or resistance to corrosion. So here the commentary says gold and silver are subject to defilement because they can be mixed with metals of lesser worth. So I don't totally get that, but probably when they mix and match and they sell it for higher value, even though the good and silver is not of a higher value. Yeah, I'm not totally sure what they mean. Okay, anyway, let's go back. Here the Buddha enumerate what does the Buddha what the Buddha means by what's subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death, to sorrow and defilement. This is the list: wife and children, men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver. Yeah. Some of it are still relevant in this modern context, like wife and children. People still seek for that. Men and women slaves nowadays probably not slaves anymore, but we still maybe employ people. And goats and sheep, this one is more for probably farmers. All this fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses, and mares. So nowadays, in the modern context, what would this list look like? But smartphones and laptop. What else? Wow, I have a lot here. I have a Kindle. What? Smartwatch. What else? Wallet. These are what's called ignoble search. When I read this today, I look around. Oh no, all ignoble search around me. Okay, let's continue with the next chapter. Sister Choi Kwan, would you like to read?
12. And what is the noble search? Here someone being himself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seek the unborn supreme security from bondage, Dimana. Being himself subject to aging, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, he seeks the unaging supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being himself subject to sickness, having understood the danger in what is subject to sickness, he seeks the unailing supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being himself subject to death, having understood the danger in what is subject to death, he seeks the deathless supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being himself subject to sorrow, having understood the danger in what is subject to sorrow, he seeks the sorrowless supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being himself subject to defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to defilement, he seeks the undefiled supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. This is the normal search. Thank you.
Thanks, Sister Choi Kwan. Okay, then what is the alternative if all of this, smartphone, Kindle, laptop is the ignoble search? Then what is the alternative? What is the noble search? Here the Buddha says, while we ourselves being subject to all of this, birth, aging, sickness, and death, here's the important praise. Having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, having understood the danger in what is subject to sickness, and so on, then we seek the unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Like this. So this is the alternative that the Buddha offers to us. The option is always available, but the Buddha kindly expound it to us. this alternative, because without the Buddha responding to us, we are not aware that this option even exists. If you notice, in today's world, how many people are aware that such a path exists? Probably not so many. Even among Buddhists, when we kind of know that this exists, we still not subject ourselves to, default ourselves to completely walk the path. But here, I think the important part is that the alternative exists. Yeah? The alternative to ignoble search, to whatever we are used to, which is the path seeking the unaging supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. That is for that paragraph. The next paragraph. Any questions or comments so far before we continue? Okay, then next paragraph is the second. Would you like to read?
Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too, being myself subject to birth, sought what was also subject to birth, being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. I sought what was also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. Then I considered thus, why being myself subject to birth, do I seek what is also subject to birth? Why being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, do I seek what is also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement? Suppose that, being myself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, I seek the unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Suppose that, being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I seek the unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, and undefiled supreme security from bondage, Nibbana.
Thanks again. For me, this is interesting. While the Buddha is still an unenlightened bodhisattva, the Buddha himself also sought what was also subject to birth. The Buddha also sought what is subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. In this case, when we see the Buddha was the same way as us, and this feels at least relatable. But the Buddha went a step further than us. He considered, why, being myself subject to birth, do I seek what is also subject to birth? Why, being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, do I seek what is also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement? Because the Buddha asked these questions, then the Buddha starts to look for the alternative. What is the alternative again? The unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Okay, I think we can read a few more paragraphs. 14, later while still young, a black-haired young man endowed with the blessing of youth in the prime of life, though my mother and father wished otherwise and wept with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the ochre robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. Having gone forth monks in search of what is wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I went to Alara Kalama and said to him, "Friend Kalama, I want to lead the spiritual life in this Dharma and discipline." Alara Kalama replied, "The Venerable One may stay here. This Dharma is such that a wise man can soon enter upon and dwell in it. Realizing for himself, through direct knowledge, his own teacher's doctrine. I soon quickly learned that Dharma as far as mere lip reciting and rehearsal of his teaching went. I could speak with knowledge and assurance, and I claimed, I know and see. And there were others who did likewise. Okay, let me read a few more. I consider it is not through mere faith alone that Alara Kalama declares, by realizing it for myself, with direct knowledge I enter upon and dwell in this Dharma. Certainly, Alara Kalama dwells knowing and seeing this Dharma. Then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, in what way do you declare that by realizing it for yourself, with direct knowledge you enter upon and dwell in this Dharma?" In reply, he declared, "The base of nothingness." Let's take the footnotes number 11. Akinchanya Yatana. This is the third formless meditative attainment, preceded by the four jhanas. It is the seventh of the 8 attainments, Samapati, in the scale of concentration. These attainments, though spiritually exalted, are still mundane and divorced from insight, are not directly conducive to Nibbana. This Alara Kalama was the Buddha's first teacher. Here, the Dharma and discipline here, it refers to whatever the Alara Kalama can teach the Buddha. So after going forth, the Buddha, in search for Nibbana, he went to Alara Kalama and then learned everything that he can from him. Then the Buddha asked, in what way does he declare that by realizing it for himself with direct knowledge, he enter upon and dwell in this Dharma? And then in reply, Alara Kalama says, the base of nothingness, which, if you recall in the Noble Eightfold Path, and what the footnote says is part of the 7th attainments out of the 8 possible attainments. But it is not yet Nibbana. Okay, I think this is a good time to stop. Any questions or comments? If not, let's do a dedication. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了。不愿追障细笑处，时时常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have an unailing Wednesday ahead. Thanks everyone for participating, and see you guys next time.